Good evening. This is Mac with the Mac Commentary. This is relatively a new channel that I started last February, but I really got into it, immersed myself into it the last couple months. And my objective is to comment and offer solutions to problems affecting black people in these United States. My prior videos have dealt with the Justice or Else March, as called by the Minister Louis Farrakhan, the impending race war in America if we continue on our present course of action, calling for people to kill or fight the police, instead of trying to empower the black communities with businesses and jobs. I also discussed the black absentee fathers and other things that's related to our community, and which is the deterioration of the morals and values that I feel is part of the gangster rap culture. However, other groups can also benefit from some of my thoughts and solutions. For instance, today I will have a medical doctor on to discuss obesity within the African American race. But my research has shown me that this problem affects all Americans, but we are concerned more or less with the black race because, and you will see why as we get into this conversation. Good evening, Dr. Bo. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great, Mac. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. I'm glad that you could join me today on the Mac Commentary. We have a very interesting topic here, obesity, and I noticed that you do have you work in this particular area with a lot of your clients. Is that correct?
Absolutely, Mac. It is a focus of many of the things that we do in our practice and our clientele.
Yeah, Dr. Bo, when I look at photos of people taken in the 1950s through the 1970s, I see slim and healthy looking people. And today, when I go to various places, for example, amusement parks, malls, big box stores, etc., I see people who are in general overweight and in many cases obese. I noticed that the stores, when I was growing up, I never saw any scooters or anything for people to ride around in the stores on. But they seem to have these at all the stores now. So my first question to you is, what is the difference between obesity and overweight? And how do you think so many people got to this point in the last 35 or 40 years?
Well, that's an excellent question. Obesity, let me give you a medical or a clinical definition. So we define obesity as a disorder involving excessive body fat that increases the risk of health problems. So when you put all that together, we're talking about a state of one's body condition that is going to give you a higher propensity to develop medical issues as a result of that, as opposed to being overweight. That may just be a cosmetic issue, it may be a comfort level, but it doesn't necessarily put you at risk for a range of medical conditions that can result from it.
So, what are some of these illnesses people can derive from being obese?
Well, there's a range of them. We know that diseases such as insulin resistance and diabetes, liver failure, a range of cardiovascular diseases such as hypertension, stroke, myocardial infarction, all have higher incidences with people who are obese. We also know that even renal failure, the shutdown of the kidneys, when there's simply too much material for the body to handle, can be a result of obesity. And then we have things such as sleep apnea, endometrial cancer, prostate cancer, polycystic ovary disease. Mac, there's a whole range of these diseases that are really impacting our community. And to some extent, they're silent because obesity, as you know, is a gradual process, takes place over sometimes many years or decades. And many of these maladies are occurring or developing unbeknownst to the client or patient until it rears its ugly head and becomes an issue.
Well, I hear doctors and people in general claiming these diseases are hereditary. Now, to what degree does heredity play versus the foods we eat and causing these conditions that you just outlined?
Well, my research shows that there is a hereditary component. People do handle food differently. But when we start getting into rolls of fat on the neck, for instance, or belt lines that are having fat drooping over the belt line, the legs or arms just dripping with fat, and people who, as younger folks, we're not involved with those types of presentations, and we see those presentations develop. This is probably not a hereditary issue. It probably is more than likely is an issue with how they're dealing with their daily calorie intake, the type of foods they're eating, time of day that they're eating, and those things are probably much more significant to their status as being obese than any hereditary factor. So I would tend to downplay the hereditary factor and focus on what can really be changed in that person's life, and that is how they eat, what they eat, and them having a good rationale for the foods that they eat.
Wow. Well, some of the statistics on obesity in the black community are very alarming to me. 4 out of 5, or 82%, of black women are obese or overweight, and 3 out of 5 black men, 69%. Now, why do you think people in the black community, and maybe the white and Hispanic communities as well, think a person is sick because he or she is slim but healthy when overweight? And
Mag, I really believe that the mass media and the medical misinformation industry, along with the food industry, have just done a job on our society and what we've come to accept as a healthy body presentation. I wanna before I go into that, I do want to bring out that there are statistical data that are encapsulated in the body mass index, that BMI. And I want to share with you what BMI is and how it can be calculated, and how everyone should at a basic know their body mass index. So this is a scale that takes your height, divides it by your weight, and gives you a number. And if I can share those numbers with you, Matt, I think it will bring out some of the things that are really associated with increased risk. If you do that calculation, and you can find it on your calculator, or you can find it on your smartphone, just punch in adult BMI calculator.
right.
And a little program will pop up. You put in your height, you put in your weight, push the button. If you get numbers 18.5 to 24.9, you're okay. That is an ideal body mass index, weight to height. If you get to 25 to 29, you need to do a little bit of work. You're overweight, closer you are conscious of what you eat and make a concerted attempt to stay in that range or get below. Mac, if you get 30 to 34.9 as your body mass index, you are obese. You have a high increased risk for all of those categories of disease that we just talked about. And you are and should be in a emergency mode in terms of reducing the amount of meat that you eat and getting that weight off of you. 35 to 39, very high risk for these medical issues. And if you're over 40, you are extremely obese, malignant obesity, and an extremely high risk.
Wow. Boy, that's really alarming right there, Dr. Bo. But let me ask you this other question here. We have so many children today that's overweight compared to years ago. Now, and it seemed like nobody seemed to pay any attention to it. Now, do you think obesity and overweight is becoming a vicious cycle that will affect generation after generation?
Mac, it's not only a vicious cycle, but it's killing that particular generation. You know, we have a feel-good now society where if a child wants to have ice cream for dinner, I hate to say this and share this with your listeners, but I've seen parents give in and give a bowl of ice cream to their children for dinner because they say that's all they'll eat. Can you imagine that?
Oh, wow.
That is really, I think, akin to child abuse.
It is.
Parental neglect at the very least. We've got to pay attention to our children, man. They're our future. They're the tomorrow. And studies have shown time and time again that if you are obese or overweight in childhood, your chances of coming down with all the diseases that we just went through are multiplied 2 to 3 times in adulthood. So if a parent is not being attentive to the type of things that their child eats, they're setting them up for a lifetime of illness, depression, sickness, social stigmatization, and really a lifetime of concerns that really did not have to be that way.
Right, and I know that the obesity and overweight it crosses all economic lines. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor. You can still suffer from this because of the type of foods out there that's available to us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now my question here, Dr. Bo, is how does lower incomes and poverty correlate with an increase in obesity in adults and children?
Great question. You know, when you're living in the inner city and your resources are limited, you tend to use the local resources to sustain your family. So if you don't have a major grocery store in your neighborhood, I know you have an international audience, Mac, and so I'm going to not name any major grocery stores because they may not mean anything to your listeners depending where they are, but we all know these food chains that open gigantic grocery stores. What we find in certain communities in Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit, that there are and I'm going to say this again because it's almost hard to believe, there are zero major grocery stores in many of these neighborhoods. And that really puts the source of food, but these are food deserts, Mac. Food deserts that seemingly where there's plenty of food, but the food there is not nutritious. It's not a variety, and it's really contributing to the ill health of that population.
Wow. Whereas you are aware, though, Doctor, corporate America has encroached on our daily lives in a way unimaginable 50 years ago. Today, when you go into a grocery store or local convenience stores and fast food restaurants, we find all the food that's past the produce department is processed in some form or fashion, especially in the grocery stores, and as well as in the fast food restaurants. However, many of the products are genetically modified. Now, my question is, what are the fast food and processed foods industry roles in the obesity epidemic that we are experiencing right now?
Well, 17% of the United States economy is associated with food. That means we're talking about trillions of dollars that go into research, modification of foods, chemicals of foods to get us to buy products. One thing people may not be aware of Mac, is that because of these millions and millions of dollars that go into research, foods are really developed in many cases along ethnic lines. So that if you were to go into a community, say in the inner city, and you look at the range and choices of foods, particularly junk foods, empty calorie foods, these foods have been genetically sometimes modified, but certainly there's been a chemical analysis to determine what that ethnic community prefers to eat. If you go into an Asian community, largely Asian community or Caucasian community, they're stocking the shelves with food that community prefers. Now, on the face of that, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you dig down into that, if you're buying food for your taste buds instead of your overall nutrition, and you don't have a car and you don't have the ability to get out of that area where you can get fruits and nuts and berries and a variety of foods, then you're stuck with these chemically modified and engineered foods that have been stocked and put on the shelf for your so-called benefit. So this food industry is huge, and their impact on communities that do not have these options of getting to healthy places to buy food and places that have a variety of foods, the impact is huge.
Wow. As you know, as we know, this epidemic, doctor, is not limited to the inner city poor, as I pointed out earlier, but it affects people across all social and economic strata. But it hits home harder with the economic challenged households, as you've pointed out there. Now, my question is, what can the lower income individuals do to eat nutritionally and get healthier by losing the weight? We know that that's what they have to do, is to lose their weight in order to get healthier. Now,
right.
But my question, I guess, is there some type of a plan that you could suggest that for all overweight or obese individuals to use to get in shape, especially those people who are living in those economic challenged areas?
Well, absolutely. A few basic facts are going to be helpful here. So 1 pound, to lose 1 pound off of your body will mean burning up 3,500 calories. an important fact, Mac, because we have certain caloric needs through the day. For, say, a 45-year-old man, he needs 2,000 to 3,000 calories to sustain himself. As that man gets older, into his 50s, 60s, and 70s, that calorie intake, daily calorie intake to account for all the things that you would do in a day, actually goes down. So when you get to about 60, you only need 1,500 to 2,000 calories. 70, 1,200 to 1,500 calories. And these calories are relatively the same for both genders. So I'm giving you the men's daily caloric intake, but you can use these same caloric counts for women. So a 70 or 60-year-old man needs a maximum of 1,500 calories to sustain himself. Yet it takes 3,500 calories to lose 1 pound. We're probably eating, Mac, 2,000 to 2,500 calories because we're walking, we're running, we're jogging. So that has to be a part of one's daily routine in order to get into to lose some of this body fat. So knowing your daily calorie intake is going to be critical. And I would like to refer your listeners to various programs which are also on their smartphones, Calorie Count, where they simply go through, look at what a leg of chicken has in it, look at the different ways that chicken can be prepared, look at that calorie count, let them make a list of what they would eat in a day, and then go back to that list and go to each food item on their calorie counter and see what that food contributes to their daily calorie count. This way you can manage the calorie count and bring your calorie count into line with one's daily calorie count. We tend to think we need a lot more food than we do, because when we were young, when we were active, when we were using our bodies during the day to accomplish certain things, walking, we needed all that. We were growing, taking care of our families. But as we get older, we actually need sometimes a third to half the calories we did when we were younger. And people sometimes aren't aware of that. So they're eating like they were when they were 40, but really they only need a 1/3 to 1/2 of that amount. So the first thing to do is get that calorie counter out, make a list of your food, and see what you're eating over the course of a day.
Right. Do you feel like there's some other things that they can do as well? Like, of course, they can't do it in the with this. We're in the fall right now, so. But in the spring, what if they have community gardens or have a home garden or something like that to start growing some of their food, their vegetables?
Absolutely. I've noticed in the city I live in that many communities are coming together, especially with some of these properties that are abandoned and leaving large swaths of areas that are just laying dormant. These are perfect situations for communities to come together around growing some of those staples that sustain your grandmother and mine in yesteryears, where we grew collard greens and turnip greens and carrots and watermelons and various other healthy and nutritious foods that sustained our parents and grandparents. So that is an excellent suggestion. And part of that also goes, every family, Matt, whether you live in an apartment building or whether you're fortunate to have your own home, you should have a drawer full of seeds, cabbage, lettuce, carrots, turnips, watermelon, seeds in them. These foods, these seeds are inert. If you were to take those seeds and plant them from the foods you got out of the grocery store, they would not grow. They have been modified by the various companies to be inert so that if you plant them, they will not grow. And that is a way to keep you going back and being dependent on them for your food instead of you being independent and having some choice and decision power over your own diet.
Well, let me ask you this one question. I've tried to read a little bit about the watermelon, the seedless watermelon. Now, what I read is that is not a genetically modified produce. What are your opinion on that? I mean, how can it not be genetically modified if it comes out seedless?
What they're probably saying, it has to be genetically modified because Mother Nature always had a way for the fruit to reproduce itself.
Right.
And the seed was essential to that, whether it was eaten by a bird and flown, 100 miles away or out into the river and washed up on the bank. So seeds are part of the dispersal and propagation of fruit that have gone on for hundreds of thousands of years. So if I cut up on a watermelon and there's no seeds in it, somebody's been tinkering around.
Well, that's what and believe it or not, they are putting that out there and saying that those things. But I know better than that. But how many people don't know better than that?
And that's just it. The food industry is playing really on the ignorance of a generation that really does not know. I teach some of this in the colleges and universities, and you'll be surprised, Mac, of the students who really don't realize that a tangerine, that some of these apples that we see now, 12 different types of apples, that really only a generation ago did not exist.
Exactly. And I can name a few of those.
This generation, and I'm going to say people maybe even 40 or under, are looking at foods that for many folks, 45, 50, 60, we grew up on a different kind of nutritional regimen. And when we went into the grocery market, and our parents came home with a bag of apples or a bag of oranges, they were sometimes tough to peel.
Yeah.
They were full of seeds, and they have genetically modified these products, and now the younger generations thinks that's the way it always was, when in fact these foods have been genetically put together for their convenience, their eye appeal, and taste, and have millions of dollars invested into that process.
And right, and a lot of this genetically modified foods like that, when you got how does that gluten get involved? What aspect what is the negative aspect of that with food?
Well, some people do have the gluten allergy. It happens to be the root word from which glue comes from. It's a material that many people respond to negatively. And a lot of foods are gluten free, and people have that's not something that would happen naturally either. People have to. That's an industry producing gluten free foods for people who are allergic to that type of ingredient. So that's another aspect of GMOs. Sometimes a healthy aspect. We don't want to say that all modifications are negative. But we certainly have to be attentive that this process is going on, and in millions, if not billions of dollars are invested into it.
Well, one of the things I noticed, Dr. Bo, in most of the communities black communities or neighborhoods that I go through, I am seeing more and more of these dialysis centers that that I didn't see years and years ago. And when I go through other ethnic groups, communities, I don't see as many of those type of centers for kidney dialysis. Is there any particular reason why we have so many in our communities?
Well, this is an observation that has been brought to my attention, not only in the city that I live in, but a lot of the urban communities around the country are these dialysis centers where there are hundreds of patients whose kidneys are no longer functioning and rely on these centers to clean out their blood. And these individuals have to go there 3 days a week, sit there for up to 90 minutes, sometimes 2 hours a day, in a chair where their blood is ran out of their body with one tube, cleansed in a machine, and ran back into their body, cleansed, and that gives them another 48 hours to live. Now, this really tells the story. If we're seeing these types of dialysis centers every 2 to 3 miles, say in a city like Detroit, and we are not seeing those dialysis centers in the suburbs of Detroit, doesn't that say a lot, Mac?
It says a whole lot. And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I'm just flabbergasted at the proliferation of these type of centers, and I'm just wondering if are the people themselves causing this, or is there some other conspiracy out there?
You bring up a good point. I want to give you a definition. You brought up the term food desert before. While we were talking here, I wanted to give you a definition of a food desert because this is not a term or terminology that you just came up with. This is a terminology that actually is used in the United States government as part of the USDA description of certain areas in the United States. And what they say is that it is a geographic area where affordable and nutritious food is difficult to obtain. And by that they mean fresh fruits, vegetables, whole foods, whole grains, nuts are difficult to obtain, particularly for those without access to an automobile. So these food deserts, Mac, are forcing people, again, to rely on food sources that they shouldn't be. The 7-Eleven, the party stores, the gas stations, the mini marts. These foods that have been engineered for their taste buds, or for our taste buds, and not engineered for their nutritious value. And one of the culprits is a food substance called high fructose corn syrup. I don't know if you've heard of that term before.
Yes, I have.
High fructose corn syrup, it's been estimated, Mac, that 30 years ago, probably none of us in the course of a year ingested high fructose corn syrup. The estimates now that in the course of a year, if you're not careful, if you're not watching your diet, eating healthy, whole, nutritious foods, you will consume 60 pounds, not 60 pounds of high fructose corn syrup. This is added to your corn chips, your candies, your sugary drinks. And Mac, what they have found is not only is this associated with obesity, and that's how we began this discussion, obesity and all its deleterious effects on our community, but it's also associated with a number of diseases in and of itself. This high fructose corn syrup is infused, it's like, and it's addictive. It's addictive. they are being fed on this diet of high fructose corn syrup, the junk foods, the fast foods, and when they don't have it, they're lashing out. So a lot of the violence, and this is how this obesity and these foods and these chemicals that we're seeing, these food deserts, really are dangerous in and of themselves, but the impact on our communities in terms of the death, just the lack of compassion and frustration that these children, young people are lashing out with expresses themselves.
Well, you know, in combination with that, then, doctor, I mean, my theory also is based on a lot of this rap music that is causing a lot of the young people to lash out as well. So when you have a combination of these two things coming head to head, it's no wonder we have so much violence in our community. I understand that over the last holiday weekend, Labor Day weekend, there were 50 killings in Chicago.
That's a battle zone.
Right. I mean, you got the president from there. You have Jesse Jackson from there. You got Minister Louis Farrakhan there. And you mean to say they can't control these 18-year-olds? Maybe something is. Maybe there is some type of drugs or something in this fructose that you were talking about. I mean, something.
This really, we really don't appreciate, Mac. And this is why I know that you had some trepidation about. You said, Dr. Bo, is the black community really being targeted? Is obesity really a form of genocide? I'm gonna have to say yes, Mac. I'm gonna have to be unequivocal in that statement that if you define genocide as taking out or killing a group of people with a deliberate intent, then this is what's going on. It is genocide. If you're putting chemicals in my children's food and in my communities that are causing them to behave in a way that they kill each other, well, isn't that the definition of genocide?
You're so right, and but what I don't understand, Dr. Bo, is we have some very intelligent people, much smarter than I am, in our community.
I doubt that, man.
And if I can figure out this and see what's happening, I'm sure that they see this, but they act like they can't do anything. Or they're not doing anything about it, and they are the so-called leaders.
And really, it really underscores the state of our communities that our quote unquote our leaders, are they really our leaders, or are they the figureheads that have been appointed to lead the sheep to slaughter? I know that's graphic and it might upset some of your listeners, but the fact is that when you are invested, when corporate America, when certain segments of society are paying your salary, and your whole existence is based on the poverty and maintaining the poverty and discontent of a people, really poverty, discontent, anger, and frustration become an industry. And you can't afford to see that industry disappear, or there's no need for you anymore.
Right, because one of the things I try to point this out in some of the other videos, that where you have a man of Dr. Claude Anderson ability and intellect, who has written books and written a plan of how the black people can be empowered economically and from an economic standpoint of view. And no one is taking him up on that. No one is trying to carry this plan out. That makes me think that something out here, somebody like you saying, is controlling these puppets that we have as leaders.
It's really an inescapable conclusion, isn't it, Mac, that if you have two eyes talking about just, pouring empty money into empty projects. We're talking about plans that would actually make them money.
Right.
Right. We're talking about investment that as entrepreneurs would increase their bankroll, and they still won't do it.
Let me give you a great example on that. When you talked about the food deserts. Now, we are talking about in these food deserts, and this study has been done on this. We are talking about 24 million people living in urban food deserts, as you call them, and they have been called. Now, one would think this is a win-win situation for black entrepreneurs to open wholesale and retail groceries in the communities, and then use black farmers to provide the produce, set up canning operations. Now, this could create hundreds of jobs within the community. Now, does it take a rocket scientist to do that when you have a plan laid out and you have a captive audience right there, a captive buyers right there? 24 million people, that's larger than many nations, Bo.
We have a situation, Mac, as I mentioned in Detroit. We don't have one grocery store in Detroit. Not one big name grocery store.
There's
is that by design?
I think there's
or is that by accident?
There may be one in Detroit. And I'm talking about within the inner city itself.
Okay.
And I believe it's owned by a black man.
Now, are you talking about your major chain grocery stores, or are you talking about an individual who had the foresight to put his own grocery store together? Because there are grocery outlets. What I mean is your Kroger's, your A&P.
No, you don't. You don't have that. Well, you may have a Myers or something on the outskirts of Detroit, but this one store is a Foodland, which is it's not a major chain or anything, but there's several of them around in the metropolitan area.
Okay, and to underscore that point, we should have 100 of those. Detroit has a population of 1 million people.
Well, you take the owner of that excuse me, the owner of that particular store. I've spoken to him in the past.
Okay.
And he has operated other major chain stores as well. And he's had this store for a number of years. At one time, he had 2. But he knows how to operate a store. I mean, if an investor came in with him, they could set these stores up all over the city of Detroit. And everybody would be making money. And I mean, why are we the only race of people, or ethnic group, or whatever you want to call us, the only one in all of the cities where other ethnic groups have to come in and set up businesses in our communities?
And it gets back to our question: is this by design or is this by accident? I don't think it's an accident, Mac.
It's not an accident because you can remember, Bo, when you were coming up, and even as a young man, probably, when you could take your car to an automobile repair shop that was owned by a black man. You could go gas up your car at a station that was owned by a black man.
That's right.
And you could go to shoe shops, get your shoe repaired by a black man. Now, what happened to all of these trades and skills and things that was within our community? And I mean, we could go on and on with this here, Bo, but I don't want to take up too much of your time talking about these type of things. I mean, but they are very important. Follow me.
They're crucial.
Crucial.
They're crucial, Matt.
Right.
And they speak to a lot of issues. You know, when we talk about unemployment, well, if you look at other communities, the employment rates are so low is because they have these businesses that employ their own youth. I'm not going to name any communities, but some of the Middle Eastern communities, the Jewish communities, the Latin communities, Mexican communities, they have many shops where they take their kids in, they get them off the street at 13, 14. The jobs may be not that significant. It might just be cutting up the onions, right?
Right.
In the restaurant. Or it might just be carrying the tools from the tool shop or cleaning the tools at the end of the day. Or if it's the cleaners, it might be just sweeping the floor.
And they have community centers for the
But
kids.
they have real communities. They're developing work ethics. They're developing the recognition in the child and the young person that you got to work for a living. You got to either develop your own entrepreneurial skills or you have to sell your skills in the larger society to make a living. And a lot of this is being lost on our young people who really want it now. You know, they want quick return. And unfortunately, as you stated, many of these kids really don't believe they're going to be alive in 2-3 years down the line. So they're doing everything they can to get their fame, their money, the big car now, because as the gangster rap would tell it, they may not be around next year to enjoy it. That song by 50 Cent, I'm going to die or make it or die or something on that level. I mean, a lot of these kids have really got that mentality that they're willing to die, and that's not a problem for them. And killing you or killing me to get what we have is not a problem for them either, man.
And it's a sad story when we have all of these elected officials out here. We have these pastors out here. It seems like they've all gotten in on this bling bling stuff. You know what I mean? And they're all looking for their own wealth, and they don't care anything about their constituents and what's happening with our young people and what's happening to this race as a whole. And until black people start standing up and demanding some accountability, we are just going to continue to suffer and go away. Maybe
Yeah, man, I want to say two things on that, and we're going to have to be accountable. And I think what you're doing is a really an outstanding thing, bringing these topics to the attention of the larger community, because we have to take personal responsibility, and it begins in our families. At the end of the day, we have to talk to the people in our families, our young people, and get them on the right path. And I happen to know a little bit about you, and you're doing this very thing in your own family and with your own children and grandchildren, nieces and nephews. And we're going to have to multiply that effort. It's got to be a family thing, because society, as you've pointed out, our so-called leadership, our pastors, our elected officials, our athletes, our famous people are not going to take up the charge, are not going to take up the fight for our people. They're paid off. They're paid off. I mean, they even have money that they could contribute that would be a write-off. They've got to write off certain millions of dollars. They won't even devote that money to us.
Well, there's a basketball player in I believe he's out in California somewhere. Just last week, or a couple weeks ago, he gave $10 million to Michigan State University, where he graduated from. I don't know.
Okay.
And white people asking, why did he give that to Michigan State when they have $1 billion endowment? And you got cities like Detroit suffering, inner cities.
Well, it doesn't make sense, does it?
It's something going on there that we don't know, Bo. And I tell you, it's going to come out one day.
It's going to come out. do you know how far $10 million, even if it was just a revolving fund where people could borrow.
Right.
And then when they make their entrepreneurial stand, put back the money. So it could be even a growing fund. It wouldn't have to be something that was depleted. It could be almost an investment fund that could be used and grow.
You know, $10 million, you set up a charter bank with $10 million, Bo. You can loan out anywhere from 9 to 16 times that amount.
Well stated, Mike. Well stated.
But based on the way the laws are set up for that, you know, with the Federal Reserve.
And you can't really believe he doesn't appreciate that or doesn't have people around him that could tell him that.
Right. But
so I think you're onto something, Mac, that these athletes, entertainers, people with the means to do tremendous good in our society are shunning these societies. You cannot drive through almost any major city and see anything that these millionaires, multimillionaires have contributed. Not one single thing. Now, I do want to make an exception. I know Judge Mathis, and I want to give him great kudos. He does have a recreational center and a community center here in the Detroit area, but he's an exception. He is an exception. The rest, and he's not even a very, he's a TV personality, but he's not in the league of some of these athletes who are multi-million-dollar entertainers and have bankrolls that they couldn't spend even if they wanted to. He's not in that league, but at least he's made some contribution to the community. I wish more people would follow his lead. He may be someone like yourself, Mac, can contact, and maybe he has some cachet with some of these big name people and get them to follow his lead.
Okay, well that's we're gonna definitely stay focused on this here, Bo, and we will have you back on this show. Maybe we can do it on a regular basis.
Mac, I look forward to that. This is a topic that we just barely scratched the surface of today.
Right. So why don't we do that? Why don't we invite you back on in another week or so, and we go through this, continue on this same topic here, obesity and all the other aspects that we've discussed this evening. And I really appreciate you taking time from your grueling schedule, Dr. Bo, to be with us and to share your knowledge with the community. And I just hope that the people that do listen to this will share it with their family and friends. I mean, I just want people to get the knowledge out there, to be not ignorant of these things that we've discussed today. And again, I want to thank you, Dr. Bowie, and I appreciate you being here with us, and have a great evening.
Same to you, Mac, and give my regards to your family.
Okay, and I want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Would you listen to my love?